I've kind of used the analogy of you got to go shop at the hardware store before you go to the toy store.
That's
Like,
right.
just go get the meat and potato stuff and then drop that piece in. And I also think the running backs have a 6 or 7 year sweet spot.
Right.
So I want to have a team that's ready that like his first carry for us, like we're good. Like
Right.
I'm going to use all of his 6 or 7 years and all those carries are going to matter.
Welcome to the Greenlight Podcast presented by BetMGM. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code Greenlight and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code Greenlight. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. If that bet loses, you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets. Just make sure you use bonus code Greenlight when you sign up. People want the draft, and I have been denying them the satisfaction, not because I don't love the draft, but because I have taken the year off when it comes to watching prospects. I'm not that good at it anyways. So I figured I'd call somebody who is. He's Daniel Jeremiah. He's everybody's favorite guest around this time of year, so I appreciate him coming on. He's going to be on NFL Network, all 7 rounds of the 2025 draft in Green Bay. Green Bay as a draft city. Daniel Jeremiah is there now, and he joins Greenlight. DJ, what's up, dude?
We're good to see you, buddy. You've been just giving the Dikembe Mutombo to the fans out there, huh? They're just
I
asking
have,
for the
bro.
draft and you're not having it.
How many years of me getting the exact analysis of a defensive end, the position that I played wrong, is going to take until I just sit it out, because it just doesn't do me any good to have some Kayvon Thibodeau, take following me around a couple years ago. Although I was pretty good on him.
What did you say? I don't give me your Thibodeau.
Well, if I remember correctly, I said he has a chance to be a very good player, and that's kind of what he's ended up being, in my opinion. He's ended up
Yeah.
being a very good player. Like, I think a lot of people, and maybe it's a good jumping off point. Do you ever get frustrated by the way some fans talk about picks that aren't the Julius Peppers of the world? Let's stay right here on defensive ends, as if it's a big failure. The guy has hit double digits already in his career on some teams that haven't been great. I know he's not a perfect player, but do you ever get frustrated? Maybe it's the wrong example when you hear fan bases say, "Oh, they just missed on that guy," but it really wasn't a miss.
Yeah, I think often people fail to go back and look at the context years, later. You're like, oh, why did we take this guy with the 15th pick? He's only gets us like 8 sacks a year. You're like, well, nobody else in that draft is getting 8 sacks a year. Like he's literally that's a good player, man. Like that's what this draft has. Not every draft offers that. So like with this particular draft, I've been kind of banging the drum of like, you got to get stars out of your head. Like this is a starter draft, not a star draft. So just go get like plug and play guys. But I was talking with a mutual friend of ours the other day, and we were talking about a player in the draft who has some medical stuff, and he's like, so the medical term that they'll say is like he's a one contract guy, right? And so like I'm like, how's it going in the room like with this conversation on this player? He's like, well, we're just getting pushback because he's a one contract player. I go, whose contract I'm interested in? My own. Like I want to get my second contract. If this guy does a good job for his first contract, guess what? I'm gonna go ahead and get myself another contract. Like getting in the third round, fourth round, and a guy gives me 4 years, dude, I'll take that. 4 year starter, that's a heck of a pick at that point in time.
Especially if it's a guy who probably got flagged and has fallen down the board a bit compared to what he could be if there
Yeah.
wasn't a knee or an ankle or something like that. So you get a quality player probably at a good value in that scenario. And yeah, so what if it's a 4 year rental? It
Look
costs
at
you
look at
three.
look at look at I look at a line like look at Peyton Wilson.
Yeah,
Peyton Wilson won them a game against Baltimore last year.
no
He had
question.
no business
Amazing
being
player.
there at that point in the draft, but it was the injuries. He was a first round caliber player that they got in the third round, fourth round.
Yeah,
So he's already paid for himself. He already won you a division game. Like
that's right.
so, I don't know. I just think like that's where I don't know. There's lots of context that gets lost in regards to these guys. But if you get a player on your team in the first round and you're not looking to replace him within 3 years, like to me that's nothing to be ashamed about.
I think you got to define the parameters, define the value system that teams are going off of. And, you know, a lot of times I think with fans, they look at things on like a 10-year kind of runway, and that's really not realistic for most prospects. And,
Yeah.
you know, if a guy's going to play 10 years on your team, that's a home run. I mean, that's a home run, no matter what position or where you got him. I mean, 10, 11-year players on a single franchise, it just doesn't happen a lot. So I guess my question to you would be, since you say solid starter draft, let's start by defining a parameter here. Can you remember another draft like it? And, you know, who is an example of a solid starter in the NFL?
That's a great question. Well, I'll just go, as you know, doing the Charger game. So, like, I'll give you, like, to me, like, Tuli Pelotu from, you know, out of USC with the Chargers. Like, he is an example to me of, like, this is a solid player where it allowed you with Joey Bosa, you know, with his number that you kind of move on there. You know, I've got this guy. He's going to be a solid, steady player. Now, I don't know if he's going to be a Pro Bowl player, but that's like a solid starter. So that's like the first name that just kind of like pops right into my mind of like, okay, that's what type of player you know, that's what that looks like. That's what that is. And sometimes with guys like Cam Jurgens, who just got a contract, would have been an example to me of like, this guy's made of the right stuff. He's going to be a really, really good player. I don't know at the time if he's going to develop into a great player. And guess what happens? A lot of times those guys who are doubles, you end up getting them in there. You're like, oh my gosh, this guy's actually going to be even better than what that is. So we did it in Baltimore all the time. Like we were always picking towards the bottom of the first round. And it's like Todd Heap. Todd Heap's supposed to be like a double. Todd Heap ends up being like a multi-year Pro Bowl player.
Yeah.
You know, when they took Ed Reed, it was like Ed Reed will be he might be the best safety of all time. Like, so sometimes these starter guys turn into stars.
And I think also the solid guys can turn into, you know, borderline stars, depending on how you call a star. Like Cam Jurgens made a Pro Bowl this year.
Yep.
I wouldn't call him a star if he's not on the Eagles, and that's no disrespect to him. He's a center.
He's a good player. Yeah.
But a good player. And oftentimes you talk about like picking in Baltimore at the bottom of the draft. The Eagles are in a groove now where the chances of you hitting on said player are higher because they're going to be surrounded by better players and better coaching and better situations. So it kind of it's kind of one of those things where it gets even better for that team picking at the bottom of the draft.
Did you ever play on teams? And obviously you were as a always notoriously great leader.
Yeah.
But were you in different environments where you thought, hey, this team, and it could even be the same team, but at this point in time, we could take on this type of player versus other years? Because I noticed it when I went from Baltimore to Cleveland. Like in Baltimore, we had you had Ed and Ray. Like if you brought in a player who was really talented but maybe wasn't a great worker, like I wasn't even worried about it because like those guys are just going to pull it out of that guy. Like he, you know, they'll get him going.
No question, there are teams that are more ready to lead. They have leaders. They have you know, locker rooms that police themselves, certainly. And a lot of times that goes hand in hand with winning, right? So a lot of these winning organizations, they can afford to do that because they have the leaders in place, but they also have a level of success where you can hide your mistakes a little bit better. You know, like the Eagles this year paid Bryce Huff, now it's not a draft pick, $1 billion, and he didn't produce. And, you know, it happens. In the NFL, it's a hard thing. I mean, it's hard enough drafting. You'd think free agency would be a little bit easier, but Howie Roseman, as good as he is, that was a miss. But look what they did. They course corrected. They got him out of the lineup, and they said, hey, we've got enough youth, and we have enough quality players on our team that we don't have to try to ride this thing out for 2-3 years.
Yeah.
And I think that factors in as well, for sure. But I think it's an interesting conversation when you talk about solid Pro Bowl star. I think there's different levels to this whole thing. I've heard it's commonly said that in the first round, there's like 16 to 17 first rounders, right?
Yeah.
And then the second round kind of starts in the middle of the first. That might be a little bit inside baseball for people at home. But my question to you would be this year, considering how you've quantified the amount of, you know, stars in this draft or first rounders, where does the second begin in this draft?
So, like, to me, like, I can just go off of grades. So in the past, like the way that I do it and how I grew up in it, like to me, like 6-7 is kind of those elite players, like above a 6-7 grade, right? Just to give you the number.
Yeah.
Last year we had like, I think I had 16 of those players in last year's draft. This year I have 7.
Yeah.
So there's really not like, if I'm gonna just pull up my list right now and I'll give you like my you know, let's say like my 14th player is Matthew Golden from Texas, a receiver. Okay. in this draft. Quinshon Judkins is my 38th player,
I saw
and
that.
they're almost identically graded.
Right.
So like it's just it's a big middle class. And, like it's not just there's a lot of starters in this draft. The star list is short, but the starter list is pretty long, and there's really no difference. Like you're going to see, I don't know how everybody has their who people consume or what list they go off of, but I can tell just in talking to teams like. I've talked to teams that are picking in the early, teens, and they're like, "This guy is in our mix." And I've talked to other teams are like, "Yeah, we'd take that guy like bottom two." Like
Yeah.
that's how wide
Yeah.
the ranges are.
So it seems like it's a little bit of an unpredictable draft when you have this kind of draft. Okay, so I've heard Jacksonville and New York are pretty unpredictable in this draft. Like they're tight-lipped, new regimes, not talking about things. Who's the biggest wild card in the top 10, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's intrigue at 3, just because we don't know, for sure. I think we know Hunter. It feels like at this point in time, Hunter is going to go 2. So the intrigue starts at 3. Do they take a quarterback? I think they'll take Abdul Carter and then try and come back for a quarterback later on.
Right.
But there is some intrigue there. Jacksonville, I mean, the quotes, I don't even know if I had it in front of me. I pulled it up earlier. Oh, here it is. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
This is from the GM. I think it's pretty simple from my perspective. We'll prioritize people and players that are intangibly rich, and by doing so, they will elevate our ecosystem, our team, by being nothing more than themselves. It's as simple as that. It's an all-time
It's that
quote.
simple.
It's an all-time
It's
quote.
literally that
Piece
simple.
Piece of cake, man. Just
Done.
go out there and find that guy.
Easy to
So,
write the mock draft up.
I just read that and I was like, okay, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So then I was like, well, if that is exactly 100% to your core what you believe, then just take Ashton Jeanty with the 5th pick.
Right. Right. Yeah. And there's a lot of people that say, hey, don't draft. And I don't know. Do you think the running back thing is the narrative that, it was, hey, we don't pay running backs and we don't draft running backs. And, Zeke Elliott was kind of the poster child for not paying backs. I'm sure you could have a handful of, early draft picks that didn't pan out at running back. But then you have, your Jahmyr Gibbses of the world. You have the signings last year that elevated a lot of teams, like the Josh Jacobs, obviously Saquon Barkley's. You also have guys like Bijan Robinson, who I think are as good as advertised, but have not made their team better. Mm-hmm. So where do you land in 2025 on this thing? And if it's the Raiders who are mocked as picking Ashton Jeanty, how do you feel about making an investment in a running back on a team that isn't there yet? I always think of it as a luxury. It's the last piece you add. Make a case maybe for why the Raiders might take him at 6.
Yeah, I've kind of used the analogy of you got to go shop at the hardware store before you go to the toy store. Like,
that's right.
Just go get the meat and potato stuff and then drop that piece in. And I also think the running backs have a 6 or 7 year sweet spot. So I want to have a team that's ready, that like his first carry for us, like we're good. Like I'm going to use all of his 6 or 7 years, and all those carries are going to matter. Versus what we saw with Saquon, like Saquon's his talent got disguised like in New York because that team wasn't ready for that. So I think it's kind of knowing where you are in that process. This year, I think it's unique in that, like a couple teams, the Bears, for a team that's picking in the top 10, with all the investment they've made in the offensive line, you can make a case they're ready. They're ready to take a back like that and have him, get off and get going. Yeah. The Raiders, I've seen them a couple times a year doing the Charger games. Like they have Powers Johnson from Oregon, who they took as a young player, as a good offensive lineman. Colt Miller's a solid, I'd say top 10 left tackle, 10 to
15.
10 to 15 in there.
Yeah.
So they're functional. Their Glaze, the kid that they took, is, from right tackle, as a young kid, played last year, solid. Like I think I could talk myself into it of like, hey, look, if we took Jeanty, we circle around, maybe take an interior guy a little bit later. Like we have a pretty young group that can kind of grow up together, and maybe they can kind of all grow up with with a veteran quarterback and a veteran coach. It just feels like with Pete at his age, and then when you bring in Geno at his age, that tells me they think they're close.
They think they're close, right?
They think they're close. So if you think you're close, you could say, oh, he is the finishing. Like he could be the finishing piece here.
Well, I mean, I look at it I've seen the Raiders be very competitive. A lot of times in division, right? You think
Yeah.
about some of those Kansas City games over the past couple of years where the gaps closed a little bit. I also think going out and getting Geno, like, I don't know, is it fair to say, hey, like Geno might be set up better this year than last year with the offensive line? I mean, and
Yeah.
that's not saying
They
much.
were leaky in Seattle.
Yeah.
No,
And the
no.
run game, the commitment to the run game. If part of like, hey, what he didn't have in Seattle was a commitment to the run game, there is a case to be made that, hey, like we can fill those holes. One of the holes is already being filled. It's been filled over the last couple of years. We'll continue to invest in the offensive line.
Yeah.
And they might say, hey, to your point, Ashton Jeanty is the missing piece. So
You,
that's an interesting
you
one.
know what's kind of interesting is like I was looking at some depth charts the other day. I'm trying to pull it up, but looking at the Raiders
Yeah.
and you get the new coaching staff in there and like some new energy. Pete will bring a lot of that with him.
Yep.
But like if they keep their front healthy, that's a good front, man.
It sure is.
They just couldn't trot him out there last year. Wilkins got hurt,
Yep.
Max got hurt, Kuntz didn't. I don't think Kuntz played the whole year.
And I like Kuntz.
Yeah,
I
he's
mean,
got
you
some
just talked
juice.
about three guys who you named two of them that to me are in that star echelon, and one of them is an ascending solid guy in
Yeah.
Kuntz.
So I mean, when we think about the window for the Raiders, I know I always tell people you earn your draft pick. Like you
Yeah,
got to suck to be picking that high. So there's
that's right.
problems,
Yeah.
but they're one of those teams you kind of look at and you're like, man, if they could get a couple pieces, and with the defense, if they keep those guys healthy, they can keep the score down. You got Geno protect the ball. You can run the ball with Ashton Jeanty. Like you can envision a world in which they're winning a lot of like 17-14, 21-17 type games.
Yes, absolutely. The games that they were in a lot of times last year, but they weren't winning them,
Yeah.
right? And so you think, hey, it's quarterback play. First and foremost is coaching and that sort of thing. So with all eyes being on the quarterback, as they always are, I look at last year and I say, I went back and looked at the list of the quarterbacks taken in the first round, and I can remember right when they picked them all, I was like, there's going to be one or two guys that it's going to be apparent immediately that they made a mistake
Yeah.
drafting this guy in the first round, and it turned out not to be true. I think it's justifiable in retrospect on each of those teams. Picking right down to Bo Nix, obviously, and Penix looks promising, and obviously like Caleb Williams is taking a lot of heat, but I think he's going to be very good.
Yeah.
And the other guys, we know who they are. We think we know who they are. So does that kind of carry over into this year's thought process for the league at large? Because you come into this draft and you're like, hey, I don't think there's a lot of great quarterbacks in this draft, but I don't think anybody thought that the first round was six deep in actuality
No.
last year. Do you come off a year like that and do you get a sense that people are going to be a little bit more aggressive and maybe surprise some people drafting a quarterback in the first round?
There's people that think that
Yeah.
I've talked to around the league. I'm a little bit skeptical just because, even last year, like those top three guys were viewed as they were top three legit dudes. Like in any draft, like Drake May could have been a first pick in a lot of drafts.
Pretty
Jaden
much.
Daniels the same. And then obviously with Caleb. So those three guys, you've got them there. And then like, okay, then you get into the next three, JJ McCarthy, talent wise, there was a lot, he didn't have a ton of production because the way they played there. Nix and Penix both had really strong arms and were good. They were viewed as like, I think Penix I maybe had in the 20s. I don't think any of those guys were below like 32 on my list. So I thought
Right.
they were all first round caliber players.
Yes.
Whereas this year, like I have Cam Ward at 8, I have Shedeur at 20, Jackson Dart at 36. Like there's just not that glut of guys that we had last year. So I think it's a little independent. There's some things I think from one year to the next you can carry over and say like, okay, the league kind of figured out something or it's a pivot point. Like I think last year was just one of those freaky years where we just happened to have all these dudes.
So with Shedeur, he seems to be very polarizing. I think part of it is obviously like we get a lot of Shedeur Sanders exposure
Yeah.
with Colorado being such a just a force in the 24-hour news cycle over the last couple of years. Rightfully so, a lot of excitement, and he did a great job at Colorado. But some people think he's not a first rounder, and some people think he's a top 5 pick. So when you look at the way you've graded him,
Yeah.
is there a player that he compares to in years past from not only a skill set standpoint, but also just a net contribution to the drafting team?
Yeah, I mean it's it's hard. It's not there's not like that one comp with him that just jumps out, but like
Right.
stylistically, I think it's Teddy Bridgewater ish,
Yeah.
you know. And Teddy played for a decade, like he played for a long time. You know, he was never an upper tier player, and I think you would probably be on the same page that it was highly dependent on who he was with, and you know, for him
Yeah.
to be functional. So Shedeur, like the unquestionables, like tough, all day tough. Like he got the crap kicked out of him. You know, he's a tough kid.
Oh yeah.
He's accurate. Like when he has some time and space, he's accurate 100%. He protects the football in terms of not putting the ball in harm's way. So those are all pluses. I like that he's had to jump start two different places, you know.
Right.
So those are all things in his favor. The cons are like more than anything else. Like, dude, Chris, he just got to play faster. Like his clock has got to speed up. The game, you know the difference, like from the college game to the NFL game, how much of a jump it is. In the college game, at times felt fast, where
Right.
he's taken a lot of sacks that he doesn't need to take. You know, they weren't good up front. They were terrible his first year. They were, you know, decent this last year. But there's just way too many times where you're inside the 20, it's third down, and you're taking a 20-yard sack, and you're like, dude, that can't happen. Like you've got to be able to work a little faster than that.
No question. I think it's one of the hardest things probably for fans to see sometimes is, it's the processing speed that holds some guys back. They might have all the tools, make all the throws, but if you're a tick late in the NFL, you're probably going to be sacked or the window's going to close. And so I think the processing deal is probably the most important innate trait a quarterback has. I'd put it
Yeah.
up there with leadership and that sort of thing. So with the other guy, Cam Ward, you have him at 8. Let's say the Titans just say, "Hey, he's best available. We got to make this move."
Yeah.
It looks like they've started to
They're gonna
stack up
take
the
him.
offensive
Yeah.
line.
Yeah.
Second round, who do you like them, or what direction rather do you like them going in to continue to fortify that team?
Yeah, I mean, I just always think if you're going to take a quarterback, I've never understood that like a team that would take a quarterback early and then like just go defense for like the next 3 picks. I'm like, you realize you're going to get judged by how that kid plays. Like if you give up 50 points a game next year and this guy shows promise, we're golden. Like
Everybody's got a job.
yeah, let's get this guy up and running.
Yep.
So I would definitely look on that side of the ball, just kind of looking down at them. They're picking 35. I think there's going to be good receivers there. Like there's 2 kids from Iowa State I really like. Jaden Higgins would be a fun one to throw in there. Might be a little bit early for the TCU kid and Jack Besh, but like I think he's going to be a quarterback's best friend. It's like big target who's tough, get you yards after the catch. So I think there's the 2 Iowa State kids, Besh. There's going to be good options there in the second round. Just get him another playmaker to go with Ridley.
I love the Cam Ward playing video games and ranking Calvin Ridley as the best receiver.
Is that
in the
amazing?
NFL. Did you catch that whole thing?
I saw a little clip of it. It was fantastic.
It went over a bunch of people's heads, but I was like, "Hey, he's climbing."
He had
my
Pollard
board.
as the top running back. I mean, it's just what a coincidence.
That is, and meanwhile, you got the Philly aggregators like, hey, Cam Ward said that Calvin Ridley's better than AJ Brown, and people are rioting in the streets.
Oh, that's so funny.
So it's hilarious. I like Cam Ward. I actually think he's got the best shot. I told you I haven't watched a lot of players in this draft, but it's easy to watch the quarterbacks. You survey the college football landscape. I'm pretty bullish on him, but after that, I'm not real sure. As it doesn't sound like you are. The Saints at 9. Are they going to shock us and reach for a quarterback? Would they hit the reset button this year?
I don't. They're so all in with all their vets. Like they just kept bringing everybody back, kind of pushing money back out into the future, which to me doesn't scream like we're gonna just we're gonna let these guys die on the vine while we break in a rookie quarterback. It just doesn't feel like that.
Yeah.
So I could see them getting one, outside of the first round. I'm looking at where they pick. They're pick 40 and 71. I could see them maybe even coming up a little bit from 40. If we don't look, there's a chance. I'm not saying it's likely, but there is a scenario where we have one quarterback go in the first round.
Yeah.
If that happens, which would be shocking but possible, if that happens, then I think you're going to see those. There's really 3 or 4 teams. You could be looking at Pittsburgh in there with them. Pittsburgh would have a tough time. I almost think Pittsburgh's a team that if at 21, if Shedeur's there, if he drops, I think they would take him.
I could see that. I could see at some point you got to take a stab at this thing if you're there.
Yeah, and I mean, a part of me is like, well, I don't know. They tried it with Pickett in this area, in this range, and that didn't work out. Is there some PTSD of taking a quarterback? And I'm like, well, they've got Mason, who's that's your bridge guy, but like
Yeah.
you got to provide some hope to the group here that you've got a future here at this position. You got to kind of flush the last one and so just view it as a one-off mistake and just keep taking your swings, man.
Because they have a problem of being, competent on a regular
Yeah.
basis to the point where they're in purgatory every
No,
year.
they're just stuck right here.
Yeah. Okay. So how does an Arch Manning factor into a draft like this? Any year where there's a looming uber hyped, you know, um, prospect the next year at a position like quarterback, especially, how does that affect some of the teams that are going to be on the fence? And do they know that if things go well, they probably won't be able to take a stab at the guy that they're building their whole kind of their MO around in 25?
Yeah, I think there's intrigue to see if he would even come out next year because there is some thought that he'll stay an extra year because he just hasn't played yet. So he'd want
Right.
to do that for 2 years. Obviously, money ain't going to be an issue for, not only just having grown up as a Manning, but more so what he's making in NIL. Like
Yeah,
he's
now
making
he's
a
like he's
killing.
rich as he's probably making almost as much as the other Mannings.
Yeah, I know exactly. He's doing
Almost.
he's doing well for himself. So I think there's a chance you'd have to. It's a little dicey when you start playing that game and then
Right.
he doesn't even come out. I
Yeah.
do think that if you look at college football right now, whether it's next year or the year after, like you're getting DJ Lagway just in peeking at him at Florida is really, really talented. Seeing him for the first time last year. You've got Arch. I know the year did not finish up the way Drew Aller wanted, but he has got a ton of ability and is a big, strong kid. We'll see what he does at Penn State next year. There looks like there's some more guys coming. My whole thing on quarterbacks is if you're going to take one in the first round, you have to be able to have the conversation of say, okay, if he hits his ceiling, if he's at his best, what is he? And if you're a team, like say you're in the AFC and you're like, okay, if this kid hits his ceiling and now I put him in a stack with Lamar Jackson, Mahomes, Burrow, Herbert, CJ Stroud, Josh Allen, like all I start stacking, I'm like, well, he's not good enough. Like,
No.
so if he hits his ceiling, he's still not good enough, then don't take one. Then
That's right.
wait until you can get one that can compete with those guys.
No question. And take me through the edge guys because this is obviously my favorite part of the draft.
Yeah.
My extensive research on this group of players is consistent of watching Jalen Walker hit bags,
Nice. Good work.
and man, did he look good hitting those bags.
So this was
So
my
I know he's more of an outside backer type, but take me through your favorite edge guys, maybe 1 through 5.
Sure. So I have Abdul Carter 1.
Yep.
I have Jalen Walker 2. And again, you got to know the right way to use him. He can do a lot of different things. I had Mike Green from Marshall 3, Mike Hill Williams from Georgia,
Yep.
and then Shamar Stewart, probably the most polarizing guy
Yep.
from A&M, who's got all kinds of twitch and power and suddenness, just didn't have any production. So, which, by the way, where do you come down on that? I've had this conversation this whole year. To me, has been a production versus traits conversation.
Well, I always think listen, ultimately to be able to justify where you pick an edge player, he has to produce, right?
Yeah.
He has to be able to finish plays. I'll peel back the curtain. Like me being a high draft pick, I could win a rush as good as anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times finishing on the quarterback was hard for me. I'd come in there like a missile and miss, and somebody else would get the sack or what have you. Or maybe I'd miss it and the ball would go down the field, and I'd be on the ground listening to the cheers of the opposing fans and know that I just gave up a 60-yard play. I think production matters, and when you see like a big jump in production, like I had, for instance, you have to figure out why that is.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you understand why that is, I'm good with it. But if you don't know why there's a big jump in production or why the player hasn't produced, then maybe stay away.
Mm-hmm.
I was excited to see that Abdul Carter had 12, 13 sacks this year. He was all over the TV. You say, okay, stamp him because he's got all the intangibles. Seems to have all the intangibles and all the physical tools. But yeah, where do you land on the production thing?
Yeah, I tend to lean more towards that.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, everybody goes, I'd like to have both. Yeah, well, those guys would go in the top 5,
Yeah.
So outside of that, you got to choose. I lean a little bit more towards the production, provided you just have, I know you can win one or two ways. This was a conversation I had with a baseball GM, and I've talked about this with some of our mutual friends in the D-line world. I thought it was fascinating because I asked my buddy is the GM of the Padres, and I said, hey, would you rather have a pitcher with 5 good pitches or 2 dominant pitches?
Right.
And he was like, Randy Johnson, 2 dominant
Too
pitches all
dominant.
day long. And so I was having this conversation with the D-line coach, and I just said, posed the same question, didn't give him the answers to the test. And he's like, oh, yeah, 100%. Just give me the two dominant rushes. He said, oftentimes these guys come back and they want to do this, and I've worked on that. Like, no. You got these 2 work. Like, we're just hone in on those and ace those 2, and you'll win a lot of rushes and we'll win a lot of games.
You know how many moves Robert Quinn had? 1.5.
Good
And
for
I
15 a year.
Yeah, good for 15 a year, good for 21 year. Just an unbelievable player. Who's the most out of that top 5?
Yeah.
Like low floor, high ceiling.
Oh, Stewart, yeah.
Yeah, Texas A&M.
Yeah, Texas
From
A&M.
A&M. Yeah.
He's got big time juice, and you saw it in flashes at the Senior Bowl and some of the one-on-ones. He doesn't have, like, for lack of a better word, just doesn't have great GPS. Like, he'll win. He wins a lot of battles and doesn't win a lot of wars. But it's like
The GPS thing is good.
you know what I mean? Like, but
know
it's
exactly what you mean.
it's all in there. I was
Yeah.
having a talk with a buddy of mine in personnel department, and we were like, I posed it to him like, game on the line, would you trust him? Like, you need to get to the Super Bowl championship game. It's 4th and 7. Like, do you trust him to win and get the job done?
Yeah.
And he's like talked himself into it a little bit. He was like, I know he'll get through the tackle. I'm like, no, I know. Like, I'm worried that him and the tackle are gonna be laying on the ground after some violent collision as the quarterback just threw the game-winning touchdown.
Yeah, which we've all seen guys like that. It is about understanding space and everything, and you don't know, because you allude to the jump and speed of the game. I mean, like, it's really hard to find space in the NFL. Like, that's your spatial awareness needs time to adjust. The last question I want to ask you, because I did ask you about defensive ends, to be fair to the offensive linemen, Will Campbell, short arms. I loved his response. At the same time, I'm wondering if you've done your own due diligence on, and I'm sure you guys have studied this extensively, how many good short arm tackles are there in the league? Like, is that something that, how we did the small hand quarterback thing, and there are counter examples to all those, those barbs that we throw at certain quarterbacks every year? Like, are there enough short arm tackles to justify taking a tackle with short arms despite that kind of stereotype?
There's not a ton of them,
Yeah.
but like, I see one, every game that he's ever played in the NFL, and Rashawn Slater. But Rashawn Slater's 33-inch arms, but you've seen Rashawn. I mean, he's wide as a house. He's got unbelievable core strength. So, like, my whole thing on the arms is an issue because guys are going to get to your chest. So if guys can get to your chest, do you have the core strength? Can you bend, and can you just anchor down and be able to absorb that? If you're flimsy and have short arms, you're done. And even Joe Tooney is maybe on a Hall of Fame track, and there's a reason why he's a guard, and we saw that in the Super Bowl because the Eagles rushed him long the whole game. They just got to his chest the whole time.
Yes.
So I know people. It's like on the outside, it's kind of fun to like make fun. Oh, you dumb scouts! Like, really, a quarter of an inch or 2 inches in an arm like makes a difference. I'm like, yeah, I can show you a lot of examples of why you would much rather have longer arms. And as a pass rusher, is the same thing.
And that's for pass rushers. I say this every year. I'd rather take a short guy. I don't know why we look at height at all.
Yeah,
I'd rather have a short guy with long arms at defensive tackle. And to your point, like, width of shoulders can matter just as much for a tackle, right? Because you're trying to get around the guy. And it's not the same doing this as it is doing this. And so, I mean, every year we get caught up in this discussion. But to your point, I think Slater's a great example. You got to have a good balance. You have to have a good anchor. You have to have good feet. If you got all those things, you can survive short arms.
Yep.
But if you're built like Colton Miller and you have short arms, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, no question. And then with Will Campbell specifically, the reason why I'd have Slater over him as a player coming out is because, like, it's not the arm length for me as much as he's narrow. He's just kind of a narrow-shouldered guy, and guys can get on his edges, and he's got unbelievable feet to recover. Yeah. But I just wonder a little bit about, like, does he have that core, like, ridiculous core strength you're going to need to be, because he's going to be put in some tough positions,
no question,
because of that. So the good thing with him is, I'm like, worst case scenario, I think he could kick in and more than survive and be a good player in there. So
you get a Pro Bowl guard, nobody's mad at you.
Yeah, no, it's a good player, and he's wired. Like, the wiring is like off the charts, elite. Yeah. So I ended up putting Membu one spot like as my top tackle, and Campbell was my second on the final one because. And I don't ever want to compare guys to Hall of Famers, so I'm not comparing him to a future Hall of Famer. But when I was in Philly and we had Peters, and I'm like, Membu has that same body. Like, he just looks just like him. And I'm like, if he could get to 60% of what he was, like, that's, unbelievable.
And it took JP some time.
Yeah.
It took JP some time. Converted tight end, the whole thing. Daniel Jeremiah, you can catch him Thursday night, 8 p.m. sharp. Be there early. He'll be doing the first round and every round of the 2025 NFL Draft from Green Bay. Appreciate the time, DJ. You're the best. Thanks for coming on the show.
I appreciate it. By the way, I heard from some folks from Podcast Boot Camp. I was like, all right, so who were the stars of the show? Like, who was it? Don't tell your brother that I said this, but
Kyle.
He got a lot of love, man.
He's good, dude.
He got a lot of love.
He could be calling games before you know it.
That's what the people told me, were like, he needs to call games. He's ready to call games.
He's ready to call games right now. So that means I got to deal with his bullshit even when I'm trying to just watch a football game.
I told him, you just edit this out, dude. Just edit this out. Don't give him that.
We don't pump his head up. DJ, man, it's good to see you, man.
All right, bro. See you, man.